this build that I have for you today, right here, this is the first build that allowed me to beat Hades 2 without the necessity to be that far into the story, without having that many power-ups, without having... I just have like... back then when I finished the game, I have several more hours now, but when I finished it, I had like 5 hours. I didn't have like any major power-ups. I just had like my basic setup, and I ran into this one, and it wasn't even upgraded. It wasn't even like rare or epic. If you manage to get some stuff that we're going to be discussing about in this video, it is going to be all the way better. Now, the quintessential part of everything is going to be just to, well, it's going to be a Triforce. It's going to be a Triforce of things, and a little bit of an extra thing as well. And anyways, the first thing that we're going to be looking out for, and this is going to be the quintessential part of the builds. You're not going to be able to perform the build without this thing. It's the Lightning Lance. This comes from Zeus. Hold cast when where the binding circle appears. Foes within are struck by lightning. This is the one that you use, the cast spell that you use with your P. This is the one that uses mana. So we'll talk about that mana a little bit later. But all throughout the rendition of the gameplay, you will see that this is so easy to use, and this just trivializes the game because you're able to aim it far away in the distance, and it's always going to be slowing down enemies. So you're always going to be safe in the distance, and it's also going to deal a native ball damage of 90 to every single one that's there. Now, this synergizes with the next one, which is the Storm Ring. The Storm Ring also going to cast lightning bolts to repeatedly strike one foe at a time, and this is also from Zeus as well. The thing is that you don't necessarily need to have Zeus here. The only one that needs Zeus to be present is the previous one, because you can manage where is it that you're going to be able to cast that thing. If you want to place Demeter right here, anything is going to cost DPS, like Poseidon, Zeus, Demeter, anyone that increases the damage dealt, even Apollo. The Apollo one is actually quite nice, it deals quite a bit of damage. All you want to do is just increase the DPS that you're going to be dealing to that single enemy, or that those enemies that are struck in between this arc that I see, that you see me always using. This is basically everything. You're going to be spamming this thing. Now, the problem is that you're going to be using quite a lot of mana, and actually using mana, it's a quintessential part of this build as well. So every single every single Olympian has their very own way of using getting mana regen. My favorite is Zeus, because it decreases the amount of mana that you have for a permanent mana buff, mana regen buff, and we don't care about not being able to have that much mana, because this thing is just going to be using 15 mana, 15 magic, and that's just going to be the Ionic Gain, I think that it's called. It's always going to give you that mana regen, but the one that I liked, that I am using in this particular build, because I wasn't able, there's always a different choice, Glamour Gain. Each encounter, one foe is always weak. You gradually restore magic near weak foes. This is very useful, and this is my, I'd say that it's fighting against the first place with the Ionic Gain from Zeus, because on top of making the enemy weak, it's also going to be giving you 8 mana regen every single second. And this is specifically useful in boss fights, because in boss fight situations, sometimes there's always going to be just the boss fight there in the screen, so the boss fight is always going to be weak. So you're always going to be dealing more damage to the boss, but you're also going to be getting that mana regen. So that is how the Triforce works. Essentially, you're able to control this thing, where you shoot the cast that you have, and then you increase the DPS for it, and then you add some mana regen for you to be able to be casting it infinitely, and you don't have to worry about anything else. Now there's one, every single little thing that you want to add on top of this is going to be up to your personal preference, to your basic attacks, to your Y attacks. It doesn't matter, the entirety of the build, and what you're going to be using like 90% of the time, it's just this. Now, Moonwater from Selene. I have a separate individual video for this thing. I use this on every single build that I have, because it gives you life on demand. It gives you, this basically functions like a potion, so whenever you take damage you're always going to be able to be healing it back. And if you upgrade this thing, as you're seeing right here on screen, you can have a whole bunch of casts, like 6 or 7, I can't remember. You're not going to be needing them because you're never going to get that much damage with these builds, but it's always nice to have it. And the only requirement for you to be able to use this thing is just be using mana, and oh boy, what do you know, this build is based on using mana, so you're always going to be having your healing potions on demand. Now, the Arcanas are pretty straightforward, quite basic, quite simple. You are going to have to make concessions. At this point, I don't have like enough resources to be able to have Death Defiance. That Defiance is always quite useful. However, we are using so much resources right now that I don't think that it is possible. You're basically going to be empowering your casts. So the Sorceress, it's actually quite nice because it slows down time for 2 seconds, like everything, making it so much safer for you to be able to cast. Now, then we have the Furies. The Furies are going to increase the damage by 20% to our casts. Remember that we're always going to be empowering our cast, and this is basically the bread and butter of this build. Then we have the Unseen. I can't stress enough how important it is for you to have the Unseen, at least as a base, because we're not going to be able to have like we can't chance it. We can't take chances. If you're feeling confident enough, then you could probably change the Unseen, for example, for Eternity, if you want to have the little extra. Yes, I did mention that our mana regen, we're going to be getting it from a Kata, but before we actually find that mana regen, we have to build everything. And having a good strong base in mana, it's actually quite a lifesaver. Now we have the Moon. The cast has 50 power whenever it detonates, so that is basically much more DPS when it comes to our casts. And then finally we have Excellence, that every wound that we are offered, it's always going to have a 30% chance to be improved to rare. That way we don't have to use Rarify from the rings, which is what we're going to be discussing about next. And then we finally well, I haven't managed to get this one yet, but Divinity is going to be ultimately what you're going to be looking for. Now, we have the amulets, the rings that we're going to be using with this build. Mainly, purely, the first one that I have ranked up is the Silver Wheel. You get this one from Hecate. This is going to give you 2000 mana regen per night. That basically means per run, so you basically have 2000 mana regen if you manage to level this thing up. Now, this is perfect for this build. The thing is that you could probably be using this to let's say, to have some mana regen before you actually do get something that we want as a Kata. So it is not mandatory to have like the Arcana for mana regen and this one for mana regen per se as a must. Choose either of. Either of is just going to be just fine. If you want to have Death Defiance, then yes, of course, take this one. If you don't want to have Death Defiance and you instead haven't unlocked your Arcanas to rarify stuff, the Cloud Bangle. This comes from Zeus. Whenever you give Zeus a Ambrosia, you're going to be able to get this one for rarify. I haven't been using this one. I'm not entirely sure that it allows you to rarify rare to epic, and if it can, then basically this is a Zeus build. If you can get as much Zeus build, the mana regen from Zeus, the aim casting for Zeus, the damage casting from Zeus, you basically are going to get everything from Zeus. You should be prioritizing everything from Zeus, and if you can rarify stuff from Zeus, then this actually quite a nice choice. But if you don't want to do such a thing, and you don't want to rely that much on that, and you do want to have that Death Defiance, the Silver Wheel, it's actually quite nice. And in reality, there is not too much to it. As a matter of fact, I just explained how everything is going to work. This build basically relies on casts. what is the benefit from that? The benefit from relying on cast is that you're always from a safe distance. Even when you reach Kronos, the fight is not that difficult because he's always attacking. He does have some kind of ranged attacks, and he does have like some kind of summons. But if you can stay away from him, you're going to be totally fine. And if you can stay away from the enemy, as you're seeing through the rendition that you have in the gameplay in the background at all times, you're going to be just fine. Zeus casting is going to allow you to do such a thing. Remember that I told you that the DPS doesn't necessarily have to come from Zeus, but if you're using Zeus Bangle, then you might as well be rarefying his stuff. Now, when it comes to the basic attacks, when it comes to the sprinting and everything else, I don't have a specific recommendation for you. I really don't. You can use like basically anything that you want to. You can try out different stuff so that you can plan different builds, because like I said, everything is going to be using the basic attack, the cast attack. We are amplifying our cast attack DPS as much as possible. We are amplifying our mana regen as much as possible so that we can be using our cast. Now, one thing that I do have to mention is that the weapon of choice, it doesn't really matter. You can venture with the weapon of choice that you want to, because it's not going to change the cast. The cast is always going to be the same. The only thing that changes when with the weapon of choice is the basic attacks and the special attacks, the Y attacks. And since we're not using those ones, then you might as well just use any weapon that you would like to use. It's not going to be of any consequence. It's not going to really matter because you're always going to be using casts. Now, yes, this build trivializes the game. It makes everything so much easier, and you do have to have some kind of setup. You do have to have some kind of unlocks. But if you're lucky enough and you are just starting the game and you're, like I said, you're lucky enough, you can basically pull it off quite easily. Anyways, like the content, like never, super appreciated. And told you today, you're gorgeous and beautiful person. You're in the day, gorgeous and beautiful, beautiful person. Have a lovely, lovely day, and goodbye.